He is not just a leader nationally, but he is also a great friend of mine. His name is Pastor Derek McCoy, and he is actually an associate minister there at Hope Christian Church in Beltsville, Maryland, where my family actually attends. Derek is also serving, however, not just as that associate minister, but he is serving actually as the president for the Maryland Family Alliance. He is also the president of the Maryland Family Council. If you have not heard about Pastor McCoy and his work in Maryland, you may have heard about some of the work that he has done. How many of you remember several years ago, actually, I guess that was in 2008, in California, where although President Barack Obama won handily, the shock to many in the political world was that particular proposition, which was Proposition 8, is that correct, Pastor McCoy? Actually was successful in that because of the large number of African Americans that supported traditional marriage. Well, although Pastor McCoy lives in Maryland, he was summoned, I'll say, by the Lord and by others to go to Maryland to actually help with that initiative. And he was on the ground during that time period to serve in a great way to see traditional marriage stand. So let's applaud the Lord for that. Obviously, we have seen natural marriage under attack since that time, but I want to say that Pastor McCoy has been extremely busy around the country consulting and helping to give voice to and thought to this important issue. In addition to serving in this capacity, Pastor McCoy also has in the past served our country as actually in the United States military, actually the Army Reserves. But probably most important to me and to my family, I know him as a dedicated man of God, a dedicated husband, and a dedicated father. Let's give a great round of applause to my good friend, Pastor Derek McCoy.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, it's good to be with you. It's good to be with you. Apologize, Bishop couldn't be with you, but just like Dean said, he sent me, so you guys have to handle it, all right? Well, this morning it is a great privilege to be with Dr. Eric Wallace and many of you, and I've seen so many people that I know, but also, it was a privilege also to just get to listen to Ben Kinchlow. I call him he's one of the statesmen. And, to learn and listen and hear what he's talking about is just phenomenal. I too, like Dean, many years ago, I remember him coming to our church when he was at the 700 Club, but as a speaker. And I said, man, that guy doesn't age a bit. He looked the same, a couple of years ago. Some of y'all will get that later. But anyway, it's a privilege for me to come and talk for a few moments. The title supposedly is a holistic view of the family. I think the presenter right before me, he did a phenomenal job. We appreciate him so much. And it was interesting where Dr. Carlson, I believe it was talking about it, and he gave a vision for the family. One of the things that I had in my points was a vision. And when you're talking about a holistic view of the family, and I'm going to try to not go off on too many narratives, but I'm going to try and stick as much as I can. But I think it's important for us to realize, and it doesn't take a lot of brain surgery, it doesn't take a lot of perspective for all of us to sit here and think, well, you know what, we have some issues in our family today. Would you agree? There are issues in our culture. It doesn't really make a difference whether it's African American culture, Latino culture, or even the Anglo or white culture. Guess what? Unfortunately, as African Americans, we tend to lead the trend on some things, but our folks in other cultures are right behind us on our heels. Matter of fact, the Latino culture, from my understanding, is actually in some categories starting to exceed where we are in terms of out-of-wedlock births and some of those other areas in certain categories. And so what it shows us is that the family is at risk. The family is at a place, and one of the reasons where I've been out here on this marriage thing back several years ago when they asked me would you be open to helping out on Proposition 8? And they said, this is a big deal. It's Proposition 8. It's about marriage. And I'm sitting in my own house. I'm kind of minding my own business, doing my thing. And we were figuring out, well, what do you mean it's on the ballot? What do you mean marriage is at risk? And they talked to me about that. And I'm thinking, it's simple. To me, I'm forgive me for my ignorance. But for me, I was just thinking, isn't everybody married? Doesn't everybody marry, man and woman? I mean, it was not, on our side of town, over on the East Coast, it wasn't, quote unquote, in jeopardy, really. Besides, you heard a little bit about Massachusetts and that kind of thing, but really, there was really a kind of maybe a bubble I was living in at a point, and I said, well, hey, it's going to be all right. But when I found out more about it and I understand what was going on, I said, my goodness, they're actually talking about redefining marriage. And I said, in my timeline, I said, I would have never thought that would be the case. I said, I'm a dad. I'm trying to raise my own kids to marry their respective opposite genders. and you understand that. I said, wow, I went to my wife. I said, what can we do? They're asking me, can I do this? Are we open to this? So we prayed about it, and I said, okay, I'll do it. Now, at the time we had, now this is the interesting thing for me, because I look at it, it was a sacrifice, and it was an epitome of family working together. And I don't cause my family to be, the best out of any. Guess what? We working through our stuff. Amen? We are working through, and I think all families have to work through it. It's a day-by-day process. The scripture talks about line upon line, precept upon precept. That's how we got to get through this. And so, but at a time where, my wife had found out she was pregnant, and we were just having our little one, what we call a surprise of 05. And, a few years beforehand, so we got a little toddler in the house, a little one. And my wife is in grad school. Prop 8 comes up, and can I go out there and live and do this thing? I was thinking, I must be crazy. But at that point, we prayed about it and really felt like I needed to do that. We needed to do it together. And if it wasn't for my father-in-law taking my kids to school every day when I was not home, because I was living in California, coming home every other week, that kind of thing. But we felt like it was a sense of mission and a call that God really spoke to our hearts to go out and help as much as we can. It's one of those things, what can I do? I didn't know a whole lot of people when I went out there. And I know I'm totally talking about the family, but for some reason I'm just kind of giving a little bit of perspective on this, because I think it talks about a family. And without him doing that, without a whole lot of us kind of getting together and a whole lot of parts working, I could have never did it. And so I look at it and I attribute that to a lot of hands in the pot. My mom, my dad, my other folks working and doing a whole lot of things to make it all work together. And really for me, I felt like I couldn't not do something when I had the opportunity and then tell my kids later on, you know what, I believe marriage is between a man and woman. I believe in the fundamental fabric of the family. I believe this is what you need to envision in your own life. But then I say, I can't do nothing on my own side. You see what I'm saying? I got 2 boys and a little girl. It's important to me to make sure we model something. So when we're talking about a holistic view of the family, first I look at it and say, we have to model something in our own families. We have to model something, and hear me, I get it. We have been struck by a tragedy called divorce. And wonderful Ronald Reagan, which so many people epitomize, one of the worst things he ever did was deal with that no-fault divorce law and say, let's sign that in. And if you look at it, that has given us carte blanche on just saying, well, I'm out. Doesn't make a difference. I'm going to be out. Irreconcilable differences. Well, the book that I read, the book that I try and live by, says, well, I can't have no irreconcilable differences. If both of us got a little bit of Christ in us, we can work something out. And we're going to make it work. Now, it's not always a wonderful, sunny, cheery day in my house. Some of those days are like, whew, Lord. And matter of fact, it was funny. I was with a colleague of mine coming here because he happened to come here on the same flight. We were talking about it. He said, if you had to get married all over again, would you do it? I said, now, let me answer that question. I said, absolutely, if the circumstances presented itself to the same exact way and my wife was around and I was all goo-goo-eyed, I would say yes, and I do, and I would do it all over again. But after 21 years, I said, it's a lot of hard work. And it's a lot of labor, and it's a lot of stuff that you have to put into it to make it work. And I said, so if the circumstances are now, would I just, let me go out? Because I'm at times, I'm gonna be honest, I really trip out on the family structures that go down, and it breaks my heart. And I also look at the guys that go through this midlife crisis, and all of a sudden, want to get a convertible and ride around with a teenager, and I wonder what's going on in their brains. Because I can't fathom that capacity of work, the capacity of energy and everything else. I'm thinking, man, I'm trying to do everything I can to keep it together. So I think for all of us, we have to look at modeling as a really important thing. I believe when the previous speaker was talking, the idea of the vision he was talking about is so important. Now, this may not be your words of what a vision looks like, but put it in your own words. Put it in that kind of thing and begin to talk to your kids about it. Begin to talk to other relatives about it. Begin to talk to people that you influence and are around you. One of the things that went down in Proposition 8, and I was out there in California, I thought it was going to be easy. I went and talked to pastors, community leaders, and other people alike, and I said, hey, this is simple. Can't you just talk about marriage? It's on the ballot. That I just want to come and give you some information. They said, no, I'm not with it. I said, what did you say? And I can't believe the amounts of conversations I had across there from San Diego to Sacramento with folks who said, no, I'm really not going to do this one. I'm going to sit this one out. That's political. All sorts of different aspects came about, and I said, are you kidding me? This is simple, and it's marriage. It doesn't make a difference. It's not a political issue. This is a fundamental fabric of society issue. This is talking about marriage. And so when we dealt with marriage and we should begin, I talk to folks, I can give you stories. I tell you, I can give you stories for the next 3-4 hours. I can't do that. But I have a lot of stories about conversations I had, debates I was in, and all sorts of situations that took place. But one of the things I realized is that people had a challenge relating why they should be married. People had a challenge. I hate to say it, even pastors that were in the pulpit. What do I say about marriage? Well, let me tell you, the ones that were with us, you got to say marriage is fundamental to society. Kids do great with a mom and a dad, but also that we have to value marriage. We have to value marriage. We have to lift it up. We have to enshrine that thing to say, hey, look, everything does not work out the way that we would like to do. Everybody doesn't have a white picket fence, 2.5 kids, and a little dog, and named Muffy, and it all looks like that. That's not happening. I know our communities, I know our where we live, and that's not necessarily the case all the time. We got dysfunction, right? We got stuff happening. I look at my own dad. He came up in the pre-civil rights era. Prior to the 60s, as what Dr. Kinslow would say, is a high yellow African American. So he really had a lot of issues. And even to this day when we talk, it's there, and the bitterness is there, and the strife is there. I said, man, he had to live through a lot of stuff, and I understand that now. But I look at it that he's had to struggle through it, but he's been a dad who's stuck around. Now, it hadn't been all right, hadn't been all rosy, but he had to stick around. And, again, we got issues in our family. I can go through that too. We got, you ever go to a family reunion, I can walk you through some stuff. But it's an interesting thing when we talk about a holistic vision for the family. We just look at one perspective. Back in 1960, especially with the African-American family, about 70% almost of kids were in two-parent households. Now we look at in 2011, it was around 39%. We look at those stats even changing even more now. And we're looking at, kids coming in out of wedlock homes and single-parent homes. They're raised in those kind of situations. So when I talk about marriage, I'm not saying, well, what about those? And we need to cast them aside, and there's no good for any single-parent mom. No, I disagree. There are a lot of single-parent households that are doing phenomenal jobs. But we also understand that we have to give a vision for what is the best environment for these kids. What is the best environment that they can be raised in, and what is the best environment that they can grow up and flourish? We understand that the design is that a mom and a dad were in the household. We understand that's the design. Now, some of us at times, for whatever circumstances, don't get it right. Folks do stupid stuff. And some guys walk out, abdicate their roles. Some women take a lunch break and never come back, whatever may be the case. But we understand that those circumstances exist, but that still does not say that we need to abandon what is the ideal of the family. You got it? We can't do that. When we're looking at our situation and we're looking at the things that were happening, I think when we look at it, sometimes I look at it like this. In Ezekiel, and I'm not trying to go overtly Christian, but that's who I am. But when it talks about Ezekiel, I think about the story when it talks about, hey, son of man, prophesy to these dry bones. And you're looking at the dry bones, and I can say that looks like the family today almost. That's right. It looks like, man, this is broken, it's disheveled, and things are not going the way we want them to go. And I've been around folks that can give me the social science. I've read information. I've studied stuff myself. I've researched. And I can go to toe with the best of them in terms of absorbing that information. Matter of fact, when we were talking about this, even from a marriage perspective out here in these marriage battles, so to speak, it was interesting when we were just kind of trying to help people get a picture of it. You had to talk about it in a framework that they understood and really try and help put it in some perspective. Let me go to this thing when I talk about this real quick again. So when I go back, and let me try to stay on track, with this Ezekiel and the dry bones, it's important that we kind of be the people that speak to those dry bones and say, sinew come up, flesh get together. And so families get together. Families work it out, reconcile where you can, try and make sure we give a vision for what families look like, try and make sure we understand those things. Sometimes, matter of fact, as Dean introduced me, we joke at times, said, man, even the simple aspect of having kids and discipling our kids is so important. We lose on discipleship in our Christian culture because guess what? There are other cultures who do not adhere to our values and perspectives and religion, who are having a ton more of kids per family. And so just in discipleship alone that way, they're winning something that we're not. And so we got to understand the fabric of family and the real aspect of having kids and those things. It's not just, so they can come and hand us the remote, but it's also that we can disciple them. And then we can, really, I hope y'all get that. That's all right. I know nobody here would ever do nothing like that, but that's all right. But it's also the understanding that we can give vision to this thing. One, it's going to be by us standing and the folks who do get the opportunity to stand to do that. But it's also going to be by you, I, and everyone together to try and paint pictures wherever we can, whether it's in books, periodicals, op-eds, anything that we could do, our own examples. But sometimes it's the simple things that we can do to make sure that families are still out there and they're still valued and they're still there. That's why I talk about this aspect of vision. Proverbs talks about it simply, where there's no vision, the people perish. And I think if the same thing happens, where we don't give a vision for marriage, people perish. And it doesn't happen. We see declining marriage ratios. I talked to a guy, an advertising executive years ago called Hal D'Onofrio, who worked on this thing, Campaign for Our Children, dealing with teenage pregnancy. When teenage pregnancy was at a high, I think that was back in the mid-90s, somewhere around that effect, the teenage pregnancy was really out there. And they were trying to figure out, how do you do this? I talked to him. I went to him really out of a marriage concept because he did some really interesting stuff. But one of the things he said, we're trying to deal with teenage pregnancy. And what we had to figure out is, how do we stop that? You know how he stopped that and developed a whole campaign around it? Was dealing with just a simple 2 words: marriage works. Marriage works. I wish I could graphically show you some of the things he put up that were just phenomenal things, but it actually showed that as they put these in urban centers, in different places around the country, teenage pregnancy rates started to decline. And I'm not adding all of the thing to him, but a lot of other pieces were working. But it was a simple thing of putting a picture of a young African-American male and female in a bride and groom dress and saying, marriage works. It was a simple thing of putting a big chicken on an ad and said, who's the biggest chicken of all? And it had a little egg in there, and it talked about a father who doesn't come home. And just different aspects. He had some really interesting ads. I can go through a whole set of them, but it was some of the stuff that was in our communities and in some of the communities. And I'd venture to say they can work in a lot of communities today if we had the dollars and cents to do it all over again. But just that simple picture for people to see that says, wow, something does work. I know my mom didn't make it, and I know, in Baltimore City, just let me help you understand, in Maryland, I live in 2 different worlds. I live in one world which I'm not too far from, which is right down the street from our nation's capital. Go to D.C. all the time. Matter of fact, I spent the last 2 days in D.C. at Hillsdale College, by the way, and working on a marriage strategy project. But at the same time, I can go to Baltimore City, and a lot of those kids who my sister actually was a juvenile defense attorney working for, with the kids there, they don't even have a hope of living past 11, 12, 13. The concept of marriage is foreign for them. I mean, just absolutely foreign. She's dealing with kids who have killed other kids and are in tragic situations, stuff you don't necessarily hear about on the news every day. But this is what goes on in Baltimore City every day. I can point to other cities I'm sure that you know about in Chicago, maybe in Philadelphia, in wherever our neighborhoods are. But as I go down in those places and I'm looking at it, I said, you go there and you try to figure out truancy. What's truancy? Because I go down and I see kids on the sidewalk all day long. And you say, this is school time. Where are they? And so we got to do something about our families. They are in a rough state. But I believe that we can do something with vision. And it's up to us to give vision. It's up to us to continue to do that. It's up to us to call those things that be not as though they were. It's up to us to speak to those valley of dry bones. It's up to us to speak about it when it's not popular, because you're going to have people that are talking about, hey, I'm the whatever group that's not for family, or whatever group that's not for the quivers, whatever that may be. You're going to have all sorts of groups out there that's going to talk about this and say, that's not who we are. We're supposed to be about America, which is supposed to be land of the free, home of the brave. Anybody and everybody can do what they want to do. Well, let me help you understand. One of the appointees of our current administration says it this way: there should be no instance where religious liberty trumps sexual liberty. Let me help you understand. In our Constitution, religious freedom is a valued part of that Constitution, a earmark on that, a stronghold perspective on it. But our appointee, I almost get boggled by the brain matter that's perhaps going through her brain at times thinking about these things. There should be no reason why sexual liberty should not trump religious freedom and religious liberty in our country. Our families turn upside down if that happens. And that means everything that we want to do sexually should be done in the name of freedom, in the name of equality, in the name of acceptance. And so that's Chai Feldblum. If you want to go look her up, feel free. But I'm not giving her more pub than that. Now, if we look about it here, and I'm going to go quick, but we got to give vision to marriage. I can't not say this as well. Prayer is absolutely important. And I don't know how many people mention this, but I got to say it. Prayer is an essential, important part of this. When you're trying to figure out what can I do for families, what can I do? Well, look, get a prayer group. Pray for the families in your communities. Pray for the families that you know. Pray in your own family. Get them together, gather them, be the hallmarks in the family. I told my mom years ago, I said, Mom, you can be whatever kind of grandparent you want to be, but it's going to be up to you to determine your role in that family. I said, now I believe you have a God-given role to be a grandparent. You have a God-given place in their life that He carves out a place that's specially for you, that you'll niche into the hearts of these kids. I said, but it's up to you to take that role and to take that place. So I said, it's up to you to begin to take them out at different times what's not around me, and pray with them. Talk to them about their life. Do whatever you can do. Build in and fortify your values into their life and fortify that picture and concept of family. Well, it was a powerful thing. Just a couple weeks ago, my mom turned 70, and my kids spoke when she was at her birthday party that we did. And when they did, it was a powerful thing because they began to talk about, they didn't talk about how nice she was or how forgetful at times she might be or how they take her on, all the shopping trips, which she does. But they talked about, my grandma always calls me to encourages me, always calls me to pray with me, always calls me when things are not necessarily the best. She gets into our lives, and they didn't understand how. But she said that she does stuff that's just phenomenal for them, and they'll never forget it. And I'm sitting there thinking, moved as a dad. I'm thinking, wow, it's working. It's working. Because that's the kind of stuff that will never be erased in their minds. They could do a whole lot of other things, and they can see a whole lot of culture things shift. But that will not be erased. Even in our own world, our children are at risk. Marriage and the defense of marriage and all of this stuff we talk about in families is not for you who are sitting here today. Because in my thing, I talk about prayer. My next thing and my last thing is advocacy. You cannot talk about this issue and not advocate this issue. And say, well, I'm going to sit this one out. I got pastors that told me I'm going to sit this one out. But I got pastors that said, I'm going to do everything I can do to make sure it happens. So when we talk about the black church, guess what? The black church is not dead. Some may be challenged with some issues of it, and yeah, they got a whole lot of things. But I'm going to tell you this, stay in there with them. Stay in their face. Stay in the place with them and begin to talk to them about, no, you can't do this. You can't be a black church that's a yellow dog. You can't not advocate for the family. And at times, because of the relationships, after a while they'll listen to you. But when they just come in and you're just talking about, political stuff, guess what? They ain't gonna listen to you. They're sold out in some aspects. But I'll tell you this, it is the place where people are flocking to in droves. And if we don't get a voice and a message in some of these places, we lose it. We lose culture. And so for me, when I deal with the church, if it wasn't for the black church, we would have never won in Maryland legislatively. Now, Illinois is the same place. You just had what I call a momentary legislative victory on marriage. And I applaud that. I was in Illinois. I applaud that. That is absolutely phenomenal. But I'm going to tell you this, don't stop now. Do not stop now. Do not think that, well, we got a breather, let's take a breather. No. The other side is not taking a breather. The other side is pushing and up at night and weighing through opportunities, possible solutions, and everything else to do it next session. We did this in Maryland already. We won, but if it wasn't for, really be honest, the black and the brown church coming together, guess what? We'd have lost the first time. We almost won it a second time where it would have never came to referendum. But by one vote, we lost it. One vote. So don't tell me I don't have stories. I can have stories for days. Tell you how the vote went down, how all the stuff went down, how all the back end, bitter, twisted governorship stuff happened. Sometimes I look at the things that I know. I said, Lord, I just need a brainwashing. Please wash my brain. But at the same time, I talk about advocacy because I said we cannot give up advocacy. And I was in this marriage strategy meeting just these last couple of days, and the interesting thing was we all kind of agreed, and these are a lot of people that have been involved in this issue around the country, every group. And in your states, there are what they call family policy councils. Now, I encourage you to connect with those family policy councils. And sometimes those family policy councils need a broadening of perspective about who are the people that you connect with. Because sometimes not a lot of people look like me are in those family policy councils arenas. But sometimes they are. And it doesn't make a difference whether you're black, white, Latino, Asian. I really don't care. I'm the guy, sometimes the only guy in the room. Matter of fact, the last couple of days, I was the only guy in the room. But we're talking about marriage strategy around the country. What do we do here from here? What's going on? What's the next thing? And the next thing is we have to fight. We can't give up. Illinois is on the radar screen. Arizona is potentially on the radar screen. Florida is on the radar screen. Ohio is a big place on the radar screen. You're talking about, even if you're talking about conservative and Republican and all that kind of stuff, you lose a marriage in Ohio, we got a big problem. They're talking about bringing a referendum there. They got to begin to fight this marriage issue. But marriage is not lost. Just because the president decided he was going to waffle, politically waffle is what I call it. That's all that is, political waffling. And he was going to do that and said, well, I've evolved and now I believe it's we can do whatever we want. Well, hey, you know what? That's fine. I still have a hard time to believe that that's what he goes home to at night, talks to Sasha Malia about and says, hey, I want you to grow up one day and marry a good woman. I doubt that's the case. I just doubt it's the case. And it seemed to give some people a ticket to say they are evolving on this issue. But you don't understand, as you evolve on this marriage issue, what does it affect? It affects all of our families, every last one of them. There's so many different caveats that they've taken off the table that we can't even talk about from a media standpoint now. But it's important so that you know. I got stats that it's interesting in the poll from a gay thing. Let me just hit this real quick, and I'm not going to overlay it. But in a poll was conducted, they said Americans were polled about, how many percentage of people they believe are gay. Guess what? Americans said 25% plus got to be gay. 25. That's what the poll came back. This is just recent. Well, guess what? According to a study, UCLA School of Law, and the other polls that were done, 3.8%. And this is up to last year. 3.8% of the population. And you look at that and you say, wow, that's a small population. Oh, yeah, but you would think it was the majority population ruling the law of the land, because there's not a day you can go by on news and not hear something about something in some state about this issue. And you're saying, wow, that's amazing. Even on the March on Washington reunion and the 50th reunion, they told Donnie McClurkin, you can't come. Matter of fact, they also said, we're going to put this in the platform of this thing and say this is about who we are, LGBT rights. Come on now.
Yes, sir.
That's not what it was about.
Yes, sir.
It wasn't about that. And so we got to understand that we're at a place where we have to advocate. They're trying to say, and I was make this point to my son the other day, and to one of his buddies, because they go to high school and they're getting all these good thoughts, right? And it's, they were in this biblical ethics class, and, they tried to water it down for him to make him say, well, biblically, we're just going to evangelize the lost and do this. I said, that's great. I said, but if you don't have a voice in this culture, you lose culture. And I said, what people would like you to do is to find you a box, put you in the box, put a cover on the box, and say, you go there and you say nothing. And if you say nothing there, we appreciate you being in culture. That's your spot. And that's what they're trying to do today. And that's why I do this every single day. That I get up and I say, I'm going to try and make the biggest difference I can in this world. And try and make the biggest thing that we could ever do. And I tell my kids, don't you live in that box. You have a voice, you have talent, you have ability, whether it's writing, speaking, advocating, talking to folks. I don't care who you are. Tell all your peers and your friends and your teenagers. The one thing they know about me, Dad is not going to be silent even when their friends are around. Because I'll tell their friends the same thing. Don't you be silent about who you are, and I tell you the same thing. Don't be silent about who you are. Stand up for the family.